Hi, this is Marek from Tryb Solo. Today I'd like to show a game called Dragonbond Lords of Vaala. It was released by Draco Studios and they sent me the game for review, so thanks for it. And this is a fantasy strategy game that takes place in the land of Valerna, where dragons and mortals fight with each other in order to get Vaala, magical power. Mortals use it for spells and magic, and dragons use it to consume. So players will take role of either dragons invading the lands of Valerna or mortals trying to defend each other and trying to gather the magical power as well. And the funny thing and the specific thing about this game is that this is a competitive game, but it can also be a cooperative game, because in this game dragons can bond with generals in order to win this game together. And so players can join forces and then they will together try to win the game. So it's kind of a competitive game, but also a semi-co-op game. It's very, very interesting. Now I'd like to show you how the game plays, so you have an idea about the gameplay, and then I will tell you my opinion on this game. So this is Lords of Vaala prepared for play. We have the main board, which represents the map of the region where the action takes place. It's divided into different regions, and we have four, you can say, factions that fight for power in this game. We have two dragons and we have two generals. No matter how many human players are in this game, there are always two dragons and two generals. If you have less than 4 players, you will use some automated opponents that will play instead of human players. But you always need to have 4 factions. This is important because the two dragons and two generals, they play a little different game. They have different actions and they can gain power in different ways. And power are these round tokens that are right now on the board. And getting power is most important because it gives you guarantees that you will win the game. The player that will get 10 power points first wins the whole game. Generals will use some area control elements because each general has got an army. An army contains of infantry, ranged unit and cavalry. And generals will deploy units on the board, will try to control different regions, will move around, will try to collect power. And dragons don't have an army. Dragons will just fly around the board. Will also try to gather power tokens from the board, but dragons can also gather the units defeated in combat. Every dragon, when it fights a neutral unit or a general and wins the combat, place the unit tokens on his or her board. And for each 3 unit tokens gathered, they are replaced with 1 power token. So each time a dragon defeats 3 units, the 3 units are discarded from the dragon board and are replaced by 1 power token. So for dragons, fighting other units is an additional way to gather power. And when the game ends, the game ends when one player gets 10 power points, power tokens, or when the event deck runs out of cards. Each round you will use 2 event cards, and you have 12 cards in total, so after 6 rounds the deck is empty and the game will end. But if someone gets 10 power tokens before that, will win the game. There's also one catch, that a dragon and a general can bond together. It's called the Dragonbond, and if at some point a general and a dragon will and move action at the same region. I will explain it later. They will roll the dice, and if a specific result is on the dice, they can bond. And it means that they now will play a kind of cooperative game where they together will try to win the game. Each of them will still play his or her own game, but if one of the bonded general or dragon, one of the players gets 10 victory points, both bonded players win the game. There are also additional benefits because each player has got some special power that is activated at this time where the general and dragon are bonded together. So this is another thing. Initially the game is a competitive one, but at some point dragons and generals can bond together and they will play kind of cooperative game against other player or against other bonded team of a general and a dragon. Apart from the main board, each player gets a player board. This is player board for a general. It contains a track where you will put your power tokens. 10 power tokens give you victory. You have description of your action: assault, harvest, deploy, and Vaala. Assault allows you to move to a region and attack the units that are there. Harvest allows you to gather points from power points from the board. Deploy allows you to deploy new units on the board, and Vaala allows you to either get magic cards or use magic cards. You also have place for the units because you have, as I said, infantry, range unit, and cavalry. At the start of the game, they are not different from each other, but during the game, as a general, you will be able to get denizen cards, and they represent different type of units like range units, cavalry, infantry, and when you get them, you will add the card to your player board, and from this moment, this type of unit will have some additional abilities and give you more combat power, and will do different things depending on the description. You have a lot of cards, and you as a general will be able to get the denizen cards during the game. And here is place for your magic cards, Vaala cards that I will show you in a second. The dragon has also got a power track, has also got 4 different actions like Wrath, where he can attack, or Horde, where he can gather different power tokens from the board. Soar is like movement, and Vaala also allows you to cast spells. But because dragon doesn't have an army, dragon has got a health track. And the more health a dragon has, the more combat power it can use. Like with when it's at full health, the dragon will use 5 dice in combat. But for example, when it's wounded, like the dragon has got 2 wounds, he will only use 2 dice in combat. And here is also the essence track. Here you will put the units that you defeated in combat. For every 3 units that are put here, the dragon will get additional power token. 10 power token will give you victory. And the boards are double-sided because one side is for the faceless player that is used instead of a human player in the game, and the second side is used for human player. The side for faceless players is more or less the same. The actions are a little more advanced because the description tells you what automa will do in its turn, but basically they work very similar. Apart from a player board, each player has got Vaala cards. These are magic cards, and you can get them using special action. Acquiring them is free, you just take the top card from this deck. But if you want to use them, you will have to pay power, spend power. Every power token that you will get in the game and that you will put on your player board is put like this, and this is unused power token. And when you spend power tokens, for example, on casting Vaala cards, you will put this token on its used side, and you cannot use this power token anymore, but it will stay, of course, on your player board, and the used power tokens are still being counted into the 10 points that you need to get in order to win the game. Apart from Vaala cards, each player has got action cards that will be used to perform different actions. And this is a very interesting part of the game. At the start of each round, first you have to shuffle, of course, this event deck. At the start of each round, you have to put one event card. And now, in the initiative order, there's always one player as the first player. You will choose one action card, and the action card shows you which actions you will be able to take in a given turn. If I would like to, for example, combat, I will choose this card and I will put it face down so other players don't see it on this stack. And the second player is doing the same. And for example, the third and fourth player, I don't have the player boards for the remaining players because this game is too big. The third player will give a card, the fourth player will give a card, and it comes back to the first player. And for example, I will choose to put another card, and the second player another card. And it works like this until one player passes. The player who passes gets the first player token, and then you put the second event card as the last card in this resolution or planning deck. And then in the resolution phase of the round, you have to turn it, and you will read card by card and perform the actions. The first card is an event card, so you have to do what it says, and then you will discard it. And now you have the action card of the first player. The player will perform the actions, then the second player will perform actions, and the third and the fourth, and so on, until all players perform the actions. The last card is the event card. You will perform the thing that is written on the card. Usually the event cards place more power tokens on the board, so the human players will be able to get them. Not only human, the faceless as well, but it will put more power tokens, so players will have more power to gather. And the round ends. So the two event cards are discarded, and all the action cards are given back to all players. Also, at the end of the round, each general will get a specific card of a region he or she controls, and if a general chooses to play this card instead of action card in his or her turn, this card allows to perform additional actions like upgrade, so you can get a denizen card from the offer, or you can reinforce. It means that you can get additional unit, or you can fortify, and fortify means that you will be able to put a city token on the board, and city tokens give more defense power for units in the specific region, but cities also allow to move through sea. If you are a general and you have an army, if you would like to move from here to a different region, and this region has a city, you can move from here, for example, to a region on the other side of the board, as long as it is connected with the sea. The fun thing is that you never know what action cards the other players use, so you can plan your actions and you can program your turn, but when your card comes out from this whole stack, the board can look completely different, the units may be different in different places, so you will have to somehow improvise and adjust to the whole situation. Also, I'd like to explain how combat works. If at any point there are these units in the same region, like the general, for example, moved with the army from here to here, and here is a neutral army, you will roll the dice, and then the attacking force will calculate combat power. You get 1 point for each unit in the basic version, because if the general acquires the unit cards, the denizen cards, they can give you additional bonuses. But the basic version is that you get 1 combat power for each unit. If you have units of all type in combat you get 1 additional power, so here it will be 1, 2, 3, 3 points for each unit, 1 additional point for the whole set, so 4 points, 1 point for a general, it's also a unit, and because it's a general, 1 additional point, so basically you get 2 points for a general, 1 point for a simple unit, and 1 additional point for each for the whole set. So here I will have 6 combat points. If the general will have, for example, just these 2 units, you will get 2 points for the general and 2 points for this unit. And then you take your dice and you will roll it. You roll as many dice as combat power you have. And the dice, they have different symbols. They have this droplets. The droplets can be empty inside or full inside. The empty droplet means that this is a critical wound and this is a regular wound. So you roll the dice and first you calculate critical wounds. And for each critical wound you can remove an opposing unit from the battlefield. So for example, if I roll at least 1 critical wound, I will remove this unit and the opposing army cannot fight back. But for example, if I didn't roll any critical wounds, I calculate the normal wounds and then the opposing force can also roll dice, and then we compare the result. For each regular wound the attacker has caused, the defending force has to remove 1 unit. For each wound that the defending force rolled, the attacking force have to remove 1 unit, and the combat ends if there are no more opposing units. The attacker has won and can stay in this region, and if not, the defender can choose to retreat, or if he doesn't choose to retreat, the combat continues, but the outcome of the combat needs to be that only 1 army stays in the given region. The generals and dragons cannot be defeated, I mean killed. If a general or a dragon is defeated in combat, it has to retreat to another region, but it can cause also one of the endgame conditions, because if at some point a general or a dragon needs to retreat after combat, for example, generals can only retreat to friendly regions, it means regions they control, or completely empty regions uncontrolled by anyone. If a general cannot retreat from combat, it will be eliminated and the game ends immediately, and we calculate the power points. The player with most power points wins the game. So this can also trigger end of the game. And I said about bonding, 2 players can bond together, I mean general and the dragon, when at some point they end up in 1 region without combat. Each player rolls a die, and if they both roll the symbol of the droplet, no matter if it's full or empty or not, if both players roll a droplet, they will be bonded, and from this moment they are not enemy for each other. They can activate the dragon bonded abilities on their player board, and they both try to win for the team. If any of the bonded players has got 10 power tokens, they both win the game. But if someone, for example, if you are the general and the dragon came here, and the player for the dragon wants to bond with you, and you both roll droplets, you can spend 1 power point, so you will put it on the used side, to re-roll your die. And you can try to re-roll your die to not bond with the player, because maybe you want to win the game, you want to win the game on your own. So this is basically how it works. For the faceless players, the game looks quite similar. The generals don't use denizen cards, they don't use the magic, the Vaala cards, but each faceless player is using the action deck. So you shuffle the action deck, and when it's the faceless player turn, you take randomly 1 action card for each faceless players, and you add it to the stack of action cards on the board. and during the action, during the faceless player turn, when the card comes up, you look at the action symbols and you try to perform the actions written on the faceless player board. They basically do the same. They move around, they combat, the dragons fly around, they can bond with human players, they can bond with each other, so a faceless general can bond with a faceless dragon. They gather power points, they use the power points for different things, so it's not very complicated. You just take, when the action cards of a faceless player comes up, you look at the symbol and perform the actions written on the board, and that's basically it. Of course, faceless players can win the game instead of human players, because they work just like normal players in this game. So this is basically how Lords of Vaala works. Let's go to the summary. Lords of Vaala is a great example of the fact that I can still be surprised by a game, because I play a lot of games, and usually when I play a game it's comparable to something else, and when I play a game I see some, elements that have already been present in previous games I've played. And I have to say that Lords of Vaala is a very unique game in a lot of ways. First of all, it's a strategy game with elements of area control, and this is nothing unique. But first of all, the idea that you have two types of players, I mean dragons and generals, and they both play a little different game, because generals have to focus on units and area control, and dragons have to fight with different enemies and consume them in order to get power. It's interesting. The fact that dragons can bond with generals is even more interesting, because you always have the dilemma to play alone and try to win on your own, or maybe you should bond with another player in order to get some benefits, in order to get special ability, the Dragonbond ability, but maybe playing alone will allow you to attack other players and steal their Vaala, their power. A lot of interesting choices. And I also love the fact the mechanic of playing action cards, because you have to program your actions. So each player plays an action card in the turn order, but you never know if the card that you played, for example the second or the third action card, will really make sense. And this is really fun, because you have to guess what other players may try to do. Maybe they will do different things, and when your action card comes up, you have to adjust to the situation on the board. It's really, really interesting, and makes a lot of possibilities and strategic possibilities, but also surprising situations. I like that the generals can hire different or get different denizen cards that will make their army unique. So the two generals, they can have different army cards on their player board, and they will have different abilities. And as a dragon, you don't have to worry about any units. You can just fly around and consume the armies that you will defeat in order to gain additional power. And the cool thing is that each faction, each player has got a specific Vaala deck of magic cards that can be you can spend power to use them, and they give you some powerful one-time actions and abilities. It's really, really cool, and it's very clever design that you always have 4 players, no matter how many humans are playing this game. You could probably even play it at 0 player count and just use the faceless players to play against each other. But this is a really cool idea, because especially for a solo player like me, because when you play the game solo, you have the 3 automa players. If you play a game with 2 players, you have 2 automa players, so it's always 4. And it completely, if you play solo, it doesn't change, the game doesn't change any rules. There are some major differences, that you are always the player with the initiative token, and you know, when the faceless player has to decide where to retreat or something, you have to do it randomly. Normally in a multiplayer game, the player with initiative token can decide. But basically, there are completely no changes in the rules, no matter if you play solo or if 2 players, 3 players, 4 players, it doesn't matter. The 4-player game is a little different, because when you play with 4 players, human players, you don't have to use the faceless players, so you can skip this part of the rules. But basically, this is a really cool idea to always have 4 players in the game. So a lot of clever designs like this, the action programming, the ability to bond with other players, the thing that you have always 4 players no matter how many humans play this game. It's very interesting. I know that this game was funded on Kickstarter, and I have just the base game here, and I know that on Kickstarter there were some expansions to this game, and if you like to play this game more or very often, I would really recommend getting the expansions, because for me the only downside for the base game is that you just have 2 dragons and 2 generals in the base game box, and you always use them in every game, and you don't have variety. With the expansions you have more dragons and more generals and more different, you know, factions that you can use instead of the dragons and generals in the base game. You can mix them together, and this is cool because it adds to replayability of this game. With just the base game box, you will always see the 2 dragons and 2 generals that are included here. Normally, if you would, I don't know, if you will be able to play with less players, like just 2, you can each game change the dragons, but you always have to use all the factions that are included in the base game box. So this is for me just the only disadvantage of the base game, but if you add the expansions, you will have more variety. But still, even with the 4 factions here, you can play different factions each time you play the game, and they have different actions, they have different Vaala cards, the generals can get different denizen cards, so they can have different armies. It's really clever game. If you play solo, the maintenance of the faceless players takes a little time. So this is the type of a solo game where you probably spend more time performing automa actions than performing your action, because if you play solo, you are just 1 player character and you have 3 automas, and for each automa you have to perform the actions. They are quite fast, but you have to, you know, run 3 automas. So you have to keep this in mind, that the overall playtime during the game, you will spend more playtime running automa players than your character. But I really like Lords of Vaala, a very unique game, different than a lot of games I have recently played, and I don't have any game like this in my collection that you can play, you know, area control game that is playable solo, where you can play against other players or you can bond with other players. The cool thing is that the faceless players, they can bond with each other and play against you, or you can team up with the automated player. It's really cool. Subscribe to my channel if you like this video, hit the like button if you like this video. You can visit me on Instagram, on Twitter, on Facebook. You will find links in the description of the video. Thank you for watching. See you next time. Bye.